Okay. Thanks, Petra. Hi everyone. Anyone that's got the energy from this end, if you can walk with me to the other, and then we'll start.
I suppose what Europe means to me is that I've grown up as part of a generation who have taken it for granted that we have the privilege to live, work, learn, love across borders. And I assumed that my children would grow up having that right, and it seems very shocking to me that their future will be very different from mine.
For me, Europe is the importance of countries cooperating together.
My name is Monique and I am French, as my accent will not tell you. I've been living in Britain for more years than I can remember, and Britain is my home and Europe is my home.
My late father, Major Christopher Milner, was fluent in French and in Spanish, and he saw service in the Second World War with the 7th Armoured Division. He was at D-Day, Salerno, North Africa, and one of the first into Berlin. And Europe to him was one of the most important things. And he'd be very sad to see what's happening at the moment. But for me, Europe is about unity. It's about our shared experience and moving forwards together as a group of like-minded people.
I grew up in Germany, in a divided country, and I knew a lot of people my age on the other side. They couldn't leave their country. I was able to come and live in another EU country, Great Britain, just because I liked the place and because I fancied being in another country. And so for me, the European community means freedom, freedom of movement, freedom to make choices where to live, where to fall in love, where to work.
Just point at the drone wherever it is.
What Europe means to me is opportunity. Opportunity for my children to travel, to live, to work, to fall in love in 27 different countries, and to learn all about the different cultures. It also means peace and prosperity.
My thoughts about Europe were formed by having grandfathers who fought in the war, grandparents who lived through the war. My dad was a child, grew up during the war. And I suppose for me that feels very real. No one thought that war was going to happen, or the First World War was going to happen, or the war before that, or the war before that. But in fact, Europe's had wars for 2,000 years and longer, and this is the longest period of peace and prosperity and stability that we've ever known in world history. And that's not something to take for granted. That's because of the European institutions that we put together after the war. And just to walk away from those institutions, to unravel that project, to me seems an incredibly dangerous step backwards into a history where you can never take peace and stability for granted.
What does Europe mean to me? Well, it means being part of many other countries which are our close neighbours and sharing a common culture which dates back thousands and thousands of years. So that's what Europe really means to me.
Europe means for me that Britain can stay in Europe. My father grew up in Germany, fled Germany in the Nazi time, fought for Britain against the Nazis, but not in Germany, but in India, and he was based in India, and he came back after the Second World War to Germany, being British then, and so he was a true European. So I grew up with a sense of Europe, and for me personally, as a British person now living in England. Europe means for me that Britain needs to stay in Europe, and I'm a German teacher in England, and I have been doing this for 25 years almost, and for me it is absolutely vital that Britain, England stays in Europe.
For me, Europe is a personal and a political issue. My father was a Hungarian Jewish refugee who came to England just before the war and brought us up on various different delicacies from Hungary. So I was brought up feeling and being both English because my mother was English and Hungarian because my father was. I discovered the European Union was a political institution that was the bedrock of freedoms and peace, and particularly in the original treaty, equality of opportunity. And for a woman, those equalities are enshrined in an awful lot of legislation that the European Union has introduced and which our government has often resisted. So for me, losing my EU citizenship is an absolute tragedy.
So my name's Kat Visor and I run a UK Sussex-based youth charity called Esteem, and we have throughout the years taken part in many different European funded Erasmus programmes, and we've also done a few surveys at Esteem, and young people really feel strongly that leaving the EU is a really bad idea. A lot of people, young people, haven't had a chance to vote in the recent election, the referendum, and they feel that it's a loss of opportunity for their future. They generally feel that inclusivity, diversity, richness of culture is only a good thing, and we want to be part of that.
Europe is an institution which evolved out of the wreckage of the Second World War, and that's something which we in the UK have really forgotten. You go to other countries which are experiencing turmoil and war, like the Ukraine, which I visited a year and a half ago, and there you really do notice that they really appreciate the possibility of maybe becoming an EU member, not for financial gains, not for the trading and the market, but specifically for the security and safety that you get from being in a larger membership bloc like the EU. So Europe gives us so much, whether it be freedom of movement or peace and security, or just generally knowing that cultures are free to exchange and mingle, and that's what we need to maintain.
Yeah, so it feels to me like the question around the EU has brought about a lot of division, and it seems to be about something wider than the question of being part of the EU, and that it's a sort of proxy argument for something else that we need to address in our society, and it seems a shame that the question of being a member of the EU or not is the subject of debate, when in fact there seems to be a wider issue to be addressed.
Okay, so the drone's about to drop down below the cliff level. It will then rise up and pull out to sea.
Europe, it's a big word, and it holds so many things, and it means so much to so many people, and no matter what people try to do to it, you can't make it smaller or insignificant. It's Europe, and it's always been a part of myself. I've always thought of other countries. I've never felt like I belong to England as much as I love England. I love England dearly, and I've never thought about England and Europe. I've always just thought this is it. We live here. We all live together, and we share wonderful things like cultures and foods and weather and ideas. So Europe, no matter what people try to do to divide, we all have our Europe, our relationship, and that can never be taken away from us.
So much of the argument about the EU has been about trade and the economy and people's wealth. And important though those things are, there are far bigger things at stake about our identities and about the sort of country we live in, about how open we are to our nearest neighbours, how we're involved with our neighbours. Britain has got a history of thousands of years of engagement with Europe. It's a myth to think of it as an island in anything other than geography. I was born and bred in Britain, lived here all my life, proud to be British. My parents came as refugees from continental Europe, and throughout the period of efforts for European unity, however flawed those efforts might have been, however bad the bureaucracy might have been, it's been the longest period of peace between European nations in many centuries.
So my message today after this wonderful event is that I will always love EU. Oh, thank you.